It started as a typical interview, but after provocative questions, it turned into something more that shocked everyone in the room. Subscribe and like, and here's how it started. The studio lights burned hot as Morgan Freeman settled into the guest chair on Bill Maher's show, his silver cross necklace glinting faintly against his dark suit, a quiet symbol of something deeply personal. While the audience erupted in applause, their excitement a low hum that filled the room like static. Bill, leaning back with his signature smirk, kicked things off with the usual warm-up, tossing softballs about Morgan's latest projects, the rise of new actors like Damson Idris and the state of Hollywood. His tone light, but his eyes sharp, like he was already sizing up his guest for something bigger. Morgan answered with his trademark gravitas, each word measured, his voice a deep, familiar rumble that seemed to steady the room. But there was a flicker of unease in his posture when Bill's gaze lingered on the cross. Then it came, abrupt and pointed. "Morgan, can you take off that cross while we're here on the show?" The audience stilled, a collective intake of breath, as Morgan's face tightened, his eyes locking onto Bill's with a mix of shock and defiance. "If I take off this cross, I'm walking off this show," he said, his voice low but unyielding. "So you choose, cross or me." The crowd murmured, some clapping, others shifting uncomfortably, as Bill let out a dry chuckle, waving it off like a joke. But the air had shifted, a subtle crack forming in the easy rhythm of the interview. He moved on, pivoting back to safer ground. Movies, craft, the industry. But the moment hung there, a live wire waiting to spark. The conversation flowed for a few minutes, Bill asking about Morgan's process, his thoughts on mentoring younger actors, and Morgan responding with thoughtful precision, his hands folded calmly, though his fingers occasionally brushed the cross as if grounding himself. Then Bill leaned forward, glancing at his notepad, his smirk sharpening. "You've played God in movies, Morgan, and it's a metaphor, right? It's art. But when people pray to the sky, isn't that just a diagnosis? You really think talking to clouds isn't some mass schizophrenia?" The question landed like a blade, slicing through the room's fragile warmth. Morgan's jaw tightened, but he leaned back, his eyes narrowing as he crafted his response, his voice steady but laced with an edge. "Belief isn't about clouds, Bill. It's about meaning, something bigger than you or me. People find it where they can, and it's not your place to call it madness." The audience clapped, a wave of approval. But Bill wasn't done. He flipped a page in his notepad, his tone growing sharper. "Okay, but why is God so quiet when kids die in disasters, yet he's apparently chatting up NFL players thanking him for touchdowns? Is that divine intervention or just a guy with a concussion hearing voices?" The crowd gasped, a few nervous laughs breaking the tension, but Morgan's face darkened, his calm fraying. He leaned forward, his voice low but fierce. "You're asking me to explain suffering in a soundbite? That's not how it works. Faith isn't a contract, it's a wrestle. You don't get tidy answers when the world's messy." The audience roared, their applause drowning out Bill's attempt to interject. But he pushed back, his voice rising. "Come on, Morgan, that's a dodge. You're too smart for fairy tales." The argument flared, Bill's skepticism clashing with Morgan's quiet conviction, each man digging in, their words sharp but controlled, the tension coiling tighter with every exchange. Something bigger was brewing, a collision of worldviews that felt like it could crack the stage in two, and the audience was hooked, leaning forward, knowing this was no ordinary interview. Stick with this. It's about to get raw, and it's worth every second. "Come on, Morgan, you're sidestepping," Bill pressed, his notepad forgotten on the desk, his eyes glinting with the thrill of the fight. "You can't just say it's a wrestle and call it profound. That's a cop-out. If faith makes sense, explain why it's not just people clinging to a fairy tale to feel better about a chaotic world." Morgan's hands, usually steady, twitched slightly, his fingers brushing the cross at his neck as he fixed Bill with a stare that could have silenced a storm. "You want me to boil down centuries of human struggle to fit your punchline?" he said, his voice low but edged with steel. "I'm not here to sell you my soul, Bill. You're not asking questions, you're preaching." The audience erupted, some cheering, others murmuring. The room split between those captivated by Morgan's conviction and those hungry for Bill's next jab. Bill, undeterred, leaned back with a smirk, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Preaching? That's rich, coming from the guy wearing a cross like it's a backstage pass to truth. The crowd gasped. A few laughs cutting through the tension, but Morgan's face hardened, his calm unraveling into something raw. "You don't get to mock what I carry," he said, his voice rising just enough to command the room. "This isn't a prop. It's not your prop." The stage felt smaller now, the space between the two men a battlefield of words and wills, the audience hanging on every syllable, sensing the interview teetering on the edge of something explosive. Bill, never one to back down, flipped to a new question, his voice casual but barbed. "All right, let's try this. If God's running the show like some CEO, he'd be fired by now. Wars, pandemics, kids with cancer, disaster after disaster. How do you explain millions still worshiping him? That's not faith, Morgan. That's Stockholm Syndrome." The audience stilled, the weight of the question sinking in, its bluntness like a slap. Morgan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned forward, his eyes boring into Bill's. "What's the point, Bill? I give you an answer, and you'll just twist it into another gotcha. You're not here to listen, you're here to win." His words hung heavy, the accusation flipping the dynamic, and the crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Bill's smirk faltered, but he recovered quickly, his voice rising. "Win? I'm asking you to make sense of it. You're the one dodging, acting like faith gets a free pass because it's personal." The argument spiraled, Bill's questions growing sharper, Morgan's responses more clipped, each man digging deeper into their corner. Morgan's hands gripped the arms of his chair, his voice steady but laced with fury. "You think you can reduce my life, my beliefs, to a debate club point? I'm not your punching bag." The tension snapped like a taut wire when Bill, leaning forward, said, "Then why are you here, Morgan? To preach or to talk?" Morgan stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the stage, his cross catching the light as he pointed a finger at Bill. "I'm done. This show's a circus and you're the clown." The audience gasped, then roared, some cheering, others stunned, as Morgan turned and walked off the set, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Bill sat frozen for a moment, his smirk gone, before forcing a laugh and cutting to commercial. The fallout was swift. Clips of the walkout flooded X, hashtags trending within hours, with fans praising Morgan's stand while others called it a tantrum. Bill's ratings took a hit, the show's usual buzz drowned out by backlash, as viewers debated whether he'd crossed a line. Morgan, meanwhile, said nothing publicly, but his silence spoke louder than any statement, his cross a quiet symbol of defiance. The story didn't end there. Something bigger was stirring, a reckoning neither man could have predicted. Keep watching. This is only the beginning, and it's worth every moment. Morgan Freeman stepped out of the studio into a swarm of reporters, their cameras flashing like a sudden storm, microphones thrust toward him as questions flew about the explosive clash on Bill Maher's show. His silver cross still hung against his chest, catching the light as he paused, his face a mask of weary resolve, the weight of the night's confrontation etched in the lines around his eyes. "Mr. Freeman, why did you walk off? Was Bill out of line?" a young journalist asked, her voice eager but cautious. Morgan's gaze swept the crowd, his silence stretching just long enough to make them lean in. "I didn't come to his show to be a prop for his agenda," he said, his voice steady, that familiar deep timbre carrying a quiet fire. "He wanted a fight, not a conversation. I don't play those games." Another reporter jumped in, his tone sharper. "Are you saying Bill Maher's show is just a circus like you called it?" Morgan's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I said what I said. If you've got a stage to mock someone's beliefs instead of hear them, you're not hosting a talk show, you're running a spectacle." The crowd buzzed, phones recording every word as a third question came, this one softer. "Do you regret walking off? Would you go back?" Morgan's eyes softened for a moment, but his jaw stayed firm. "Regret? Number, I respect myself too much to sit through disrespect. Go back? Maybe when the conversation's about understanding, not scoring points." The reporters pressed closer, sensing a story that was far from over, their questions growing bolder. Is this personal now between you and Bill? Morgan shook his head, his voice dropping lower, almost confessional. It's not personal, it's principle. You don't get to strip someone's faith down to a punchline and call it discourse. Bill's smart. He knows better. Or he should. The air crackled with the weight of his words, each one landing like a stone, and the reporters scribbled furiously, aware they were capturing a moment that would ripple far beyond the night. Online, X was ablaze with clips of Morgan's exit and now his measured but unyielding responses, fans rallying behind his stand while others accused him of dodging tough questions. Bill's show, meanwhile, bled viewers, its ratings dipping as the backlash grew, but whispers circulated that Bill was planning a response, maybe an apology, maybe a counterattack. Morgan walked away from the cameras, his cross glinting one last time as he slipped into his car, leaving the reporters hungry for more. Something bigger was coming, a reckoning or a resolution, no one knew yet.